Hello and welcome to another Aperture Speaks video. Obviously this is my blog, Aperture 64, which is at aperture64.wordpress.com, and today's image is going to be a little bit of a different image from ones I've been editing recently, so I just called this video Editing Fun. It's actually an edit of a picture of my niece, which I think I took it. I'm not too sure. There's a lot of images in the summer and I'm not sure if I took it or my wife took it, so I'm pretty sure I took this one. And it's of my niece Jemima. I edited it quickly in Adobe Camera Raw, and then I brought it into Photoshop. The sort of effect I'm going after today is something I haven't really got a good name for it. I sort of want to call it a cartoony image because it does have like I don't know, this sort of newspapery cartoony feel, but then again it's also a bit like a mixed media. I think you have to decide at the end. If you have any idea what you could call this sort of image workflow, you can just stick it in the comment section below. We'd love to actually know what it could be, so at least I can have a name for it instead of that strange thing that I do from time to time. I've done this twice before, and it actually works really well with kids of all ages. So the first thing I did was actually want to make a selection of the face, the skin tone area, and I wanted to desaturate it. So what I did is I created used a pen tool to make a selection, and then I was going to have to desaturate this layer, desaturate it somehow. I first used to work on a human saturation layer, and I was like, that doesn't really work for what I was going to need to do later. So I just duplicated my background layer and just applied a layer mask. I saved all my selections, but I'm going to use in this video in my channels. This is because if I was going to need that selection again, I could basically just click on it and I could load it back in. Once I've desaturated, obviously I need to bring back in some of the details. Just going image desaturation just creates this very grayscale image, and just by burning in some details and dodging out some other details, it really sort of brings in features, and you can really concentrate exactly where the lights come from. This was taken outside, and I think actually from where she's standing, it was actually under a white canvas tent, so it actually got quite a nice diffuse light coming in from the above, so it has a nice effect. I actually then applied quite a bit of noise to the image. I know we've talked before about reducing noise, this time it's okay to add it. I posterized this just to bring in more contrast to the image, and then I colorized it using color balance, only in the midtones though. And this sort of created this sort of reddish yellow sepia tone. And I just grouped all those together, and then I just created a cool face. And really the next few steps is just repeating the same thing over again. And one of the things I did when I'm repeating the steps is just to make everything smooth. Instead of just going back through and going, okay, now just duplicate the background layer, apply the filters, I just went straight through and just made my selection, duplicated the group, renamed the group, and then deleted the layer mask on the copied background layer. And then what that meant I had to do was then just reselect it. And then I could copy in. Also, I could just copy the adjustments as well, and then just add them as clipping masks again on top. So it actually isn't that difficult to actually produce this over and over again. The only slightly more hard bit is making sure you get good selections. The selections I made were not perfect, and that's because with the type of image I was going for, I didn't really need perfection. It was okay to have it looking a little bit rough, because it sort of adds to this sort of maybe a little bit of a grungier feel in the image in a way. Obviously, I'm trying to give the selection as close to as possible. Just tweaking it here and there. I added a few different anchor points just to make sure it really was gonna work. So once again, I'm just going around and just making the selection. And in duplicating things and using that as especially if you have the same method but it's on a different selection, just duplicating and then dropping it into the layer mask was just sped up everything. The next thing I actually wanted to look at was actually the hair. The hair has to have a similar technique as well. So I'm just going back around and selecting the hair. I think with these sort of things I do, it's more for my own pleasure than actually doing it for anyone in particular. Because I think if someone actually said they want this done, I'd try and dissuade them because I would spend probably a lot more time. I mean, the overall work time was about an hour, if I remember looking at the screen capture video. So wasn't so long, but I had done this because I had done this before. I had my notes, so I knew exactly where I was going and what my next steps were. And that's the other thing, actually. If you actually create a workflow, is to write it down. Then you always remember it. I have a few notebooks which are filled with different things. Some of them are from when I first started using Photoshop, so they're quite out of date now in the way they can be used or the way that they should be used, because it talks less about using adjustment layers and more about duplicating things, applying a filter, duplicating that again, applying this filter, and things. When I came to colors and hair, I wanted a slightly different tone to the actual skin, slightly more saturated, just so it actually just stood out. The next thing I was thinking about was actually the clothes. The one way I used to do the clothes was with solid colors. She's got quite a colorful top on, so I just thought the easiest thing to do would actually just to select the clothes and then place it in the right place in the layer mask so that any sort of like overlapping can sort of work together. Sorry, organizing in my layers. And that's the other thing about when you do an image like this has multiple layers and things. I always say that you should group them and you should name groups, and you should always have obvious names for things. Because when you look back at it in a couple of months' time or a couple of years' time, you may have no idea. I know that I was looking at an image I actually did 3 or 4 years ago, and someone wanted it printed, and I thought, okay. So I got the image, and I thought I'll have a look at the TIFF file just to make sure everything's okay in it. Just checking before printing, look at it at the print size, and then also resize from the TIFF. And I had all these layers, and none of them were named. They're like duplicate this, duplicate that, a color balance adjustment layer, hue saturation adjustment layer, and all of them filled with different masks. And I was like going, where is everything for? And it's actually I also had a smart object hid in there as well, and I was like going, what's in the smart object? And it was just very bizarre going back and looking at this, and I realized that this was the point when I was actually working a lot more with layers, but I hadn't got around to layer management. Layer management sort of saves your bacon sometimes, because you can actually even look at an image and actually work out the workflow from it. So once again, I duplicated everything, put it in, applied all the clipping masks I needed to do, and then I sort of went around and just adjusted the colors just to make sure they really popped a little bit, added the noise. I did these adjustments differently because I wanted to have a slightly less noise and a bit more posterization because of the textures. And then I was just sort of working out with the different colors, trying to make sure I could find one which actually worked. The problem that I have is the background. The background was quite complex, so I needed to really work out how I can make the background work. I played around with a few different things here. First thing I actually did is I blurred the layer, and then I created a high pass filter to sort of get in the sharp and applied it on top of the blur, which created this sort of strange effect in the background. Here I'm just trying to work out exactly where what someone was adjusting. So I was like, whoa, I changed something and it's completely gone haywire. It doesn't really work, this bit, and I'm just trying to fix it to work out why it doesn't work and to get everything working again. I do sort of like that detail in the background, but I haven't kept it in the final bit because I think it's actually a little bit distracting. I then sort of thought about maybe just like reducing the opacity a bit so you do have some of the background in, but it didn't really work either. So sometimes I make adjustments and then just come back to them and go back and see, constantly flipping backwards and forwards. I decided to keep it this very sort of blurred background. And with the vibrancy, you get a lot of different colors because you get the blur off her. So you can actually see that pinkish bit that's actually her clothes, which is quite nice. And you see I'm just still switching around on that high pass. I added my vignette. I think that was about it. Oh no, I then adjusted vibrance and saturation just to really work out and get the best tones. She needs to be the dominant part of the image. So the background needs to be interesting but not too distracting. So interesting enough to sort of get the viewer's attention, but not so distracting. And this is where I was just sort of finishing up. I was just doing some highlighting work. Just sort of burning in the shoulders a little bit. Adjusting the contrast. Yeah. And so this was just right at the end. I really just made my changes, and here we go. So the image actually does look quite interesting, especially this really noisy effect with the adjustments. The hair is quite similar to the skin tone, but it's a bit more saturation, which does make it pop a little bit. And the colors in the clothes sort of really stand out as well and do sort of contrast against. So it has a sort of like, I don't know, colorized but not colorized, black and white but not black and white. But there we go. I hope you enjoyed the video. This video will be on my blog, aperture64.wordpress.com, and you can find all sorts of other things on there as well. My Twitter is @aperture64, and I update daily, and even maybe something hourly. And I also have a Facebook page. So I hope you can pop along to any of those, and please tune in next week. I generally post the videos on Tuesday, but this week it's been up on Wednesday for some reason. I'm just a little overworked, maybe. We'll have to see. Hope you have a great Easter. Bye-bye.